I wasn't born to be acknowledged. I was born to prove them wrong. That's the sentence I repeated to myself every time I stood in front of the mirror, after sleepless nights and meetings that stretched into dawn. If someone asked me where my success came from, they wouldn't hear a fairy tale, only blood, sweat, and a quiet, relentless smile. I wasn't an heir. I was the one climbing each stair with my own feet, while others were born already standing at the top. And this story began in a place that seemed beyond saving, a small company just months away from declaring bankruptcy. That company was Stonebridge Logistics, founded by my father, Robert West, in the suburbs of Nashville, Tennessee. And I, Avery West, his daughter, was the last person he ever thought would save the family business. At 25, my father finally allowed me to join the business, after I earned my MBA from Vanderbilt, not because he believed in my ability, because he was too exhausted to keep the company afloat on his own. At the time, Stonebridge had fewer than 20 employees, 3/4 of unpaid bank loans, and a headquarters in a dilapidated building that had once been slapped with a power cut notice. I remember walking into that office for the first time. No printers humming, no typing, just a suffocating silence, like a sinking ship slipping slowly underwater. My father used to be resilient. He'd founded the company in the late 80s when the logistics market in the South was still raw and full of promise. But times changed, technology changed, demand changed, and he clung to outdated operations like they were lifelines. For years, Stonebridge survived on old favors, small-time contracts, and his stubborn refusal to evolve. I didn't blame him, but I knew if I didn't act, everything would collapse before I had the chance to prove I could do better. In the beginning, I didn't have an office. I sat in the far corner, next to the copier and a broken heater. I didn't touch authority, I observed. I learned. I started by talking to the drivers, the coordinators, the former clients who had walked away. I wrote down every weakness, every crack that had gone unnoticed for years. Then I proposed changes: digitize route tracking, renegotiate north-south shipping contracts, and most crucially, cut 3 longtime partners draining us with excessive commissions. My father resisted. "Those guys were with me since the garage days," he said. But I didn't back down. I used data, revenue metrics, profit margins, and direct client feedback to make my case. 3 months later, net profit rose by 28%. 6 months later, we landed a $900,000 0-cents contract, enough to clear the bank debt and reinvest. Gradually, I was allowed to make decisions without approval, but I knew permission wasn't trust. My father still believed everything I did was temporary, that one day, Daniel, my younger brother, would return and take over, just as destiny had always intended. I didn't argue, I worked. I started at 6 a.m. and got home after 9 p.m. No vacations, no dating. I never left the company for more than a day in 7 straight years. Every step I planned. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was fortifying. Because I knew the day would come when they'd try to push me out of the very thing I had saved. And when that day came, I would be ready for a war they never thought I'd dare to fight. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" My father's voice echoed through the dining room, calm, warm, and cold as ice in crystal glass. I set my wine glass down, my heart jumped. The cozy room froze, like everyone sensed something was coming, and no one could stop it. He stood by the fireplace, one hand resting on Daniel's shoulder, my younger brother who'd just returned after 6 years, bouncing between failed cafe ventures. "After nearly 2 decades of leading this company," my father said, eyes scanning the guests, "I believe it's time to pass the reins to the next generation." He paused, clearly savoring the moment, then turned to Daniel and announced as if it were long decided, "My son Daniel will be the next CEO of Stonebridge Logistics." Applause erupted. The words hit me like a sucker punch. I looked around. Some people glanced up from their glasses, smiling politely. Others toasted, as if this was perfectly natural. I swallowed. No one looked at me. No one asked what I thought. 10 years of grinding, rebuilding, transforming, erased with one sentence. I smiled, a smile as hard as forged steel. Congratulations, Daniel, I said, raising my glass. My voice steady, my hand didn't shake. But inside, something cracked. Daniel nodded modestly, playing the part of the chosen one, already basking in victory without lifting a finger. I knew that look. It didn't ask for gratitude or effort. It simply assumed entitlement. My father raised his glass again. To a bright future with our new successor. Glasses clinked, eyes met. I sat silent, heat rising up my spine like boiling water. As I stood to leave, my mother caught my gaze. She didn't speak. Her eyes weren't sad or angry, just heavy with regret. I hated that look because she knew. She always knew. Driving home, I didn't play music. I didn't cry. I didn't scream like in the movies. I drove, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. You really thought they'd choose you, huh, Avery? I muttered in the dark. I wasn't angry they picked Daniel. I was angry they assumed I'd clap and step aside like a shadow waiting to vanish on cue. I was used to being underestimated. But that night, they didn't just doubt me. They erased me. At home, I didn't change. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, pulled up shareholder data, internal contracts, every agreement I had drafted, defended, and signed. I knew exactly what I held. I didn't need permission. I had built this from the ground up, so no one else could put their name on it. At 2:47 a.m., I typed the first line of an email to the company's legal counsel. Activate shareholder clause No. 7. Confirm executive authority. Sent. No hesitation. I leaned back, closed my eyes. I saw my father, hand on Daniel's shoulder, smiling like everything had been settled. I exhaled, not out of defeat, but because they had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I arrived at Stonebridge headquarters at 7:45 a.m., an hour earlier than usual. Same walls, same building, but today, every inch felt different. Today, this was a battlefield. The receptionist glanced at me, nodded, then looked away awkwardly. Rumors had spread. I could feel the hesitation in every passing stare. No one looked at me the same. They weren't wondering if I belonged anymore. They were waiting to see if I'd fall or if I'd fight. I wasn't falling. I never had. I walked into my office. I closed the door behind me, opened my laptop, logged into the internal shareholder system. Everything I needed was already there. They thought I was just the acting executive, but I'd been the majority shareholder for 3 years. Back in 2019, when the company nearly got sued over a failed international contract, I personally covered the legal fees, almost $250,000, 0 cents out of pocket. My father had no choice but to transfer 12% of his shares to me as collateral. He never asked for it back, he thought it was only temporary. But I never do anything temporarily. I pulled up the file titled 2020 Shareholder Agreement Final Version. It contained a special clause, Clause 7C, which stated that any decision to appoint a new CEO must be approved by the holder of more than 50% of the shares. I held 53.5%. My father had only 26% left. The rest belonged to minor shareholders and a few angel investors, people who had signed NDAs and voting proxy agreements in my favor for the past 3 years. They thought I was just a placeholder. I was the one holding the key. 8:30 a.m. I picked up my phone and called Sandra Clark, the corporate attorney who had worked with me since 2016. I need you to send the shareholder enforcement notice to the board before 9 a.m. The draft is in the email I sent last night. I'm on it, Sandra replied. Avery, are you sure about this? As sure as I am that my father never intended to hand this company over to me, no matter how many times I saved it. 8:59 a.m. I opened my office door and stepped into the hallway. No yelling, no grand speeches. I just had to show up. And right then, the elevator doors opened. My father stepped out, walking beside Daniel, whose face looked smug enough to accept an award. My father wore a navy suit, deep red tie. He looked at me and gave a faint smile, as if preemptively forgiving me for something I hadn't yet done. Avery, he nodded. Today's a big day. Daniel needs your support for the transition, at least for the first few weeks. I smirked. Well, it might not go exactly as you expected, Dad. Daniel gave a dry chuckle. No need to be tense, sis. It's just a smooth handover. I didn't respond. I just turned and walked straight into the executive boardroom, where the board was already waiting. Behind me, I heard their footsteps quicken. They still thought they were in control. Inside, I projected the 2020 shareholder agreement onto the screen. When my name appeared next to majority shareholder, I turned to look at my father, then at Daniel. No one said a word. There will be no handover, I said clearly. Because legally, no leadership changes can be made without my approval. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're joking? Daniel, I turned to him. The only thing you inherit today is a lesson. Don't think you can take something you never built. My father's face flushed red. He stood up abruptly. Avery, you're tearing this family apart. No, I replied. This family tore me apart a long time ago. Now, I'm just protecting what I built with my own hands. My father stayed standing, gripping the edge of the boardroom table like it was his last anchor to power. Daniel sat frozen, lips tight, hands clenched. He wasn't smiling anymore. I looked at them, unblinking. You don't have the authority to appoint a new CEO, I said, each word cutting like a blade. And Daniel doesn't have the competence to run Stonebridge, no matter how badly you want to pretend otherwise. He took a deep breath. You're abusing power. I gave a cold, quiet laugh. No, I'm using the power you never thought I deserved. Daniel shot up, voice cracking. Why are you turning this into a war? I thought you were family. I turned to him, eyes sharp enough to pierce through his performance. Family doesn't sit back while their sister carries a company for a decade, then smile like a champion when handed everything, just because he's a man. You want war? This is it. And you fired the first shot, with your silence and your fake humility. The boardroom was dead silent. I walked over to the main screen, tapped to change slides. Up came a growth chart. 10 years of data showing Stonebridge's steady rise. Every upward curve marked with nights I didn't sleep, flights I took solo to New York, Boston, Houston, just to land deals. I turned back. I'm not here to ask permission. I'm here to state the truth. I'm the only reason this company is still alive. My father didn't speak. But his once proud eyes had dimmed. Not because I had fooled him, because he had never truly seen me. I'm not firing Daniel, I continued. But from now on you'll report to me. You can learn, you can fix your mistakes, or you can leave. Your call. Daniel shook his head, furious. You can't treat me like a subordinate. I'm the son of a man who just got outmaneuvered by his daughter in what he once thought was his private empire. I interrupted. Names don't run companies, skills do. And if you're embarrassed, I tilted my head slightly. The door's right there. Don't make me open it for you. The air froze. A few people turned their heads away. Truth stings, even in silence. My father sighed. You've already won, Avery. What more do you want? I stepped closer. Just a desk between us now. I never wanted to win. I just wanted to be treated like someone who mattered from the start. He said nothing. The face of a father faded. Only a man remained. One who finally realized he had bet on the wrong heir. I pulled an envelope from my coat pocket, set it on the table. This is the restructuring plan. I stay CEO, Daniel can remain as an advisor, no voting rights. And you, Bertha, keep your shares if you wish. But from now on, your voice is no longer part of company decisions. Daniel slammed the table and stood. I'm not sitting here to be lectured. Then stand up and walk out, I replied, unwavering. This isn't a classroom, Daniel. This is reality. And in this reality, you lost. He threw one last hateful look at me, then stormed out. The door slammed shut behind him. I turned to my father. You can accept reality. Or fight me. He stared at me for a long moment. Finally, he said just one thing. I need time. I nodded. Good. Because the company doesn't. I walked out of the boardroom without looking back. My heels echoed through the hallway like war drums. Staff glanced at me. Some nodded, some looked away. That was fine. Soon, they'd understand. This wasn't Robert West's company anymore. This was Avery West's. And the game had only just begun. 3 days after that fateful meeting, I walked into the office and knew something had shifted. Hesitant eyes, whispered conversations as I passed. The local business network had run a headline that morning. CEO outed. Talented younger brother steps in. The Wests rebuild Stonebridge. I stood frozen in the middle of the office. Then I laughed. Not out of shock, but because I knew it was coming. They couldn't beat me legally, so they turned to public opinion. 1 hour later, an anonymous article exploded across business forums. Avery West, cold, controlling, unfit for empathetic leadership. Sharp words, bold accusations. All lies. And I knew exactly who was behind it. Daniel. The brother who never managed to build a decent brand, now trying to bring me down with leaked and fabricated information. And my father? He stayed silent. As always. He never needed to speak. Just sighed at the right moment, and people believed he was the victim. I had 2 choices. 1. To strike back. I didn't choose to explain. I chose the truth, and I chose to fight. That evening, I called Reese Monroe, a financial investigative journalist I had met at a business summit 3 years ago. I have a story you won't turn down, I said, eyes fixed on my laptop screen filled with confidential files. What do you need to get started? Reese asked. Internal documents, falsified financial reports under my father's leadership, and the unauthorized expenses Daniel approved during his so-called internship. I paused, then added, and a clear picture of how I saved this company from collapse. Something no one seems willing to admit. The next morning, the article ran on the front page of Business Mirror. Avery West, the woman who kept Stonebridge from falling, what the media won't tell you. The piece detailed every step I'd taken. In 2018, reduced costs by 26% through automation. In 2020, secured a $4,200,000 0-cents distribution deal with a regional supermarket chain. In 2022, expanded into cold chain logistics, raising Q1 revenue by 42%. The article ended with a quote from Reese. If Avery West is too cold to lead, then maybe the logistics industry needs more people exactly like her. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages came from investors, former employees, even past partners. One senior executive messaged simply, "If you're still in charge, I'm ready to return." That afternoon, I called an all-staff meeting. The main boardroom was full. No one knew what I would say. They sat there, waiting, out of curiosity or fear. I stepped up to the podium, no PowerPoint needed. I know many of you are wondering if I'm fit to lead, if I'm turning Stonebridge into a place of pressure. I looked around, my voice steady but not cold. Then look at the numbers. I held up a large printed board. Plus 312% revenue growth over 5 years. Plus 6 new markets. 0 outstanding debts. Not a single employee terminated for underperformance, only for lack of integrity. I lowered the board. Stonebridge wasn't saved by sentiment. It was saved by hard decisions, precise data, and belief in myself when no one else did. Applause followed, not thunderous, but enough. I didn't need them all to take my side. I just needed them to understand. I wasn't here to be liked. I was here to take this company further than my father ever imagined. That night, Daniel called. I didn't answer. 3 minutes later, a message appeared. "You just dragged the whole family to the chopping block." I looked at the words, then deleted them. No reply. No retreat. I didn't drag anyone. I turned on the light, and they revealed themselves. 3 days after the Business Mirror article, I walked into the special shareholder meeting with the composure of someone holding the ace. But I didn't smile. This wasn't a moment for satisfaction. It was time to end all resistance. On the table was the senior leadership restructuring proposal. Everyone had a copy, including those still secretly aligned with my father and Daniel. No more gray areas. Today was black or white. I stood up, eyes sweeping across the room. Thank you for coming. I won't waste words. You've all seen the rumors, the articles, the facts. I'm not here to explain. I paused. I'm here to reestablish order. Garrett, the CFO and once a close ally of my father, cleared his throat. Avery, I don't question your achievements. But a sudden leadership overhaul like this can cause shockwaves. I looked him in the eye. What's the issue? They're ineffective, they're disloyal, and they're being influenced from outside. I laid down a stack of documents. 3 board members here were in contact with Daniel last week, via private email and phone, about triggering a vote to reinstate him as CEO. You thought I didn't know? The room went dead silent. Someone tried to interject. I raised my hand. Silence, I said, not loud but sharp enough to freeze him mid-sentence. I've spent over a decade building this empire, while you clung to your seats and played it safe. I pulled up a screen showing side-by-side financial data, the last 3 years under my leadership versus the last 3 under my father. Net profit up 270%. Bad debt down to 0.7%. Client retention tripled. If this is how someone unfit to lead runs a company, then I hope the qualified ones stay silent forever. No one spoke. I laid out the restructuring proposal. In the next 30 minutes, you'll vote. If you support the plan, stay. If you don't, sign your resignation. Right here. There is no neutral ground. Lenny, a board member, stood slowly. I used to think you were too young to understand power. I was wrong. I'm staying. I nodded. Thank you. I need truth-tellers, not people-pleasers. 7 minutes later, 3 members walked out, all longtime loyalists to my father. I signed the approval immediately, in front of the new board. Stonebridge officially entered a new era, no longer tethered to the name West as inherited legacy. That evening, my father called. Are you cutting off the family completely? I leaned back in my chair, still typing an email. I'm not cutting anything. You and Daniel were the ones who let go first. He sighed. Daniel sold all his shares. He says he won't come back. I didn't respond. Not because it hurt, because I had seen it coming. And now, I felt nothing at all. What about you? I asked. After a long pause, he replied, voice quieter than before. I'm keeping 5%. Not for the money. For the memories. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them, sharp and clear. Memories don't need power to exist, Dad. The call ended in silence. But this time, I was the one who hung up. The next morning, I walked into my new office on the top floor, the one that was once reserved for the heir. Now, the name on the glass door read, Avery West, Chief Executive Officer. I looked out at the city stretching below, light reflecting off every window pane. At last, no one was pulling strings behind me anymore. I hadn't just held on to the company, I had made it completely mine. But I knew those who lose power never go quietly. And if they had even 1% chance to turn the tide, I'd be right here, waiting. On a quiet Friday evening, with only the hum of air conditioning and a soft yellow glow on the ceiling, I received an email from my mother. Meet me Sunday, Daniel will be there. No arguments, just family. Those last 6 words made me freeze for almost 5 minutes, eyes locked on the screen. Just family. A year ago, I might have softened. Might have set aside the hurt just to hold on to something called home. But now I had learned, family is not a place you shrink yourself to fit into silence. I went anyway, Not for Daniel. Not for my father. Only for my mother. The house on the outskirts of Jacksonville hadn't changed. Beige walls, neatly trimmed front yard, and the same family photo on the shelf. Still missing me. An old picture from when Daniel got into college, while I was too busy saving a sinking company to pose. Mom opened the door. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, giving me a quick hug. Like she feared I might pull away. I didn't step back, but I didn't hug her either. I had changed. She still hoped I hadn't. Daniel was already at the dining table, wearing a white shirt with the top button undone, like this was a casual reconciliation after a misunderstanding, not after a betrayal soaked in power games. "How have you been?" he asked, trying to sound warm. I pulled out a chair and poured myself a glass of water. "Doing fine, still CEO, still running the company, still not selling out for a shiny mask of morality." I looked up. "And you?" Daniel sighed. "You still can't lower your tone, can you?" I laughed. "I've lowered my tone for 10 years. When Dad handed it all to you, I stayed silent. When you accepted it like a birthright, I said nothing. But when you came back and claimed, I dragged the whole family to the guillotine. I figured silence had run its course." Mom tapped the table gently. "That's enough. I didn't bring you both here to reopen everything." I looked at her. "Then why did you, Mom? Stage a feel-good reunion?" She clenched her hands. "I wanted the three of us to sit down. Not as company, not as CEO, not as a failure, just as Avery, Daniel, and your mother." I turned to Daniel. "Do you have anything to say? Not an excuse, the truth." Daniel inhaled deeply. "You're better than me. I've known that for a long time. But you're also terrifying. You do everything perfectly but never give anyone room to make things right." I leaned forward on the table. "Being cold doesn't kill, Danielle, but lying does. And you took the side of the lie. You're not sorry, you just hate being exposed." He looked down. "So what do you want from me?" I stayed quiet for a moment, then spoke, clear and calm. "Nothing. You owe me. Not money, but the years I spent thinking I had a real brother." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Avery, you can't cut us off like this." I stood. "Mom, I spent 12 years chasing loyalty from a family that never returned it. Now, I keep only what's worth keeping. The rest..." "Mom, I'm not cutting off. I'm closing the chapter." I pulled out my car keys. "I don't carry resentment anymore. I just don't wait around either." Daniel said nothing. Mom didn't stop me. Dad didn't show. And for the first time in years, I walked out of that house without carrying a single wound. That night, I sat alone on the rooftop of the company building. The breeze carried the scent of the sea. The city below still buzzed with noise and motion. I unlocked my phone, opened the photo folder, and deleted the last family picture I had. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed to keep something that never kept me. Avery's story isn't just about reclaiming power. It's proof that real worth never needs permission to be recognized. When even those closest to her turned away, she learned to stand tall on her own strength and vision. In real life, many are just like Avery, quietly building, quietly enduring, and then one day, they don't rebel, they rise. So what do you think about Avery's journey? Was she too harsh, or simply claiming what was rightfully hers? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life stories about family and resilience.